Fantasy sports fans, listen up. Did you know that your chances of winning on draft are 80% better than on salary cap sites? That's right, 80%. That's why draft is my favorite fantasy site. No more getting crushed by the pros, and it's not just me. More than 1 million people that have already downloaded Draft 2. Play in a real live NBA draft right now. Be done in under 5 minutes and get paid out the very next day. Drafts are filling up every second, so you can join one whenever you want. All new players get a free entry into a real money draft when you make your first deposit, but you have to use my promo code B2B. That's B2B. That's right, play in a real money draft for free just by using my promo code B2B. But it gets even better. Draft is so sure you'll love it that they're even offering back-to-back listeners a money-back guarantee of up to $100. Just search Draft in your app store or go to draft.com and come play free right now with promo code B2B. Coach, how you doing, man? Tank top season?
Actually, amazingly enough, we still have cool enough weather to open up our windows indoors the last 2 days. But yes, I'm wearing a tank top and it's really sunny outside. I mean,
nothing can stop him.
It's 70-something degrees.
Wow. So you actually you came in there. I was thinking that you were going to come in and say like, yeah, have a t-shirt. It's 81 degrees. It's chilly. But you're still going tank top. I appreciate the dedication.
I work out when I'm writing. I do like a push-ups and plank routine, and it's just easier to do in a tank top. No one sees me, so I'm not quote unquote showing off. That's for sure.
Then why do you even need the tank top at that point?
You.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit shirtless on my exercise ball as I write. I have to have some standards.
All right. So speaking of standards, the playoffs are here. I'm excited. I'm generally, I would say I'm a hater on the 82 game regular season. I think it's way too much. I think players you watch last night's games are exhausted. They need this weekend, or at least today and tomorrow, to rest up and get ready for the playoffs. Congratulations to the Minnesota Timberwolves for ending the playoff-less streak. Congratulations to Thibodeau, Jimmy Butler. I looked this up last night that Oliver Miller played playoff minutes in 2004, the last time they played in the playoffs, Minnesota Timberwolves.
Oh, my God.
Oliver Miller!
I watched the game, and that was one of the games my son and I were watching at the same time, and I was texting with my buddy Jim Peterson, their color commentator.
Yeah.
And I felt like he wanted them to win more than the players did at some points. But they put up a great visual of what was going on the last time they made the playoffs. And I think one of them was the iPhone was still 3 years in the future.
Oh, that is crazy.
Yeah.
I was just starting my freshman year in college, and Rob Mahoney was in diapers still. So that's really nice.
What year was it?
I mean, I'm still in diapers now, so that's not really a thing.
2004.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Right? Isn't that right, Rob? 2004, I think it was.
That's right.
Yeah.
You were Tom, you said you were a freshman in college?
Yes.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
I got married 14 years, and my twins were 3.
Yeah. So I was a freshman walking onto the campus of Wake Forest University with a guy named Chris Paul, who's in the playoffs, #1 seed. Look, I've got big numbers for each of these series. I don't know how much prep you guys have done. I've been working all morning to get the little nuggets, the little numbers that will help you see into the future of each of these series. Let's do real quick. Any parting words for Frank Vogel and Jeff Hornacek, who were let go last night / this morning? Rob.
I think for me, it's just kind of the contrast in organizational philosophy between the teams that get it and the teams that don't. I don't really think that Vogel or Hornacek did some kind of overwhelmingly great job, but I don't think that's the kind of thing you fire them over, given the injuries both teams have had, given the rosters that both teams have had. If you liked those guys enough to hire them in the first place, I don't really see the reason in firing them now, but it's just kind of the way things go.
Coach, what do you think?
I just think those are two franchises from ownership down that don't really know what the hell they're doing right now. And so it's just, if you're on a ocean that's got a storm and the waves are crashing everywhere, it almost doesn't matter what vessel you're on. You're going to be in for a rough ride. So until they kind of settle in as organizations, it really doesn't matter who they hire as a coach.
Yeah, and I gotta say too, this is one area where I really like what Philadelphia did, just in terms of, we can go argue to death about the process, but what they did in explicitly kind of stating their goals up front was they gave Brett Brown a lot of cover. They made it clear up front, this team's going to lose a ton of games. We're in it for the long haul. We want the development. We want the culture building. We want all these things that kind of go on in the background of a franchise when, from the outside, from a media and fan perspective, we tend to evaluate these guys by how many wins in a given season, which is really not an instructive way in a lot of cases to evaluate the job they're doing. And in the process, gave Brett Brown just an incredible, ability to establish the foundation that they wanted to. And I think he's done a tremendous job this season. And so if you give your coaches, and if you believe in them and you hire the right people, that much room to work and that much latitude and that much cover, they can do some pretty incredible things.
I thought he was a great hire also. Great point, because I think he was a player development guy. He had been a head coach in Australia. He had coached the Australian national team. He was with the Spurs organization, so he knows what coaching superstars is like. He's got a couple in Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. So not only was he a development guy, but he was a guy who could actually use some of the experience that he had with the Spurs and as the Australian head coach to know what kind of big stars, big egos are like. So it's not that Frank Vogel and Jeff Hornacek can't do that. It's just what Coach Thorpe said is that they need some sort of guidance. They need, when things are rocky, to have a plan. And the 76ers in the last 6 seasons have barely more wins than the Orlando Magic. The Magic have the worst record since the Dwight era, and I don't think they know what they're doing yet. At least the 76ers had a plan and they stuck to a North Star on that rocky ship, right? But this organization with Orlando and New York, I think they don't know what they're doing.
So you guys have heard me say for many years, I quote someone else, the saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think, Tom, I told you in a earlier pod, a friend of mine, I'm kind of getting into this business consulting business now. And a guy that's in that business as a CEO said to me, one of their mantras is culture as strategy, which I just adore. And we could easily, we would win any argument to any jury that neither of those franchises can fairly say they have a good culture as strategy. It's just the opposite. So they're going to continue to get eaten up until they get that part right. And I agree with Rob. I've been saying for weeks now, I'm so happy Philly kept their coach. They had a good guy. There wasn't much he could do with what they were going through. You just had to build the culture and play fast. And the guys that end up hanging around are more experienced now at playing fast and keep trying to acquire talent and develop the talent. And now look at them. So I give them credit for that. The organization got to win for that.
So Philadelphia is opening against the Miami Heat. It's a 3-6 matchup. Let's start there. Philly's 52 wins this season. Miami's 44. The season matchup, they split 2-2. Actually, Philadelphia was outscored by 2 points in the regular season. BPI at ESPN says they have a 78% chance of winning that series. Joel Embiid, I think, is the big question mark here. My big number for this series is Joel Embiid scored 37. 37 is the number of points that Embiid scored with Hassan Whiteside guarding him in 94 possessions, according to Second Spectrum data. On the other side, Whiteside scored 25, slightly below his usual scoring output, and the team margin was 105-94, advantage Philly. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I'm not the Philadelphia doctor. I'm not the trainer. I don't know if Joel Embiid is coming back, but I do know that the Hassan Whiteside question mark is fascinating because Embiid, it lights a fire up under his ass when Whiteside's out there. It's going to be great. I don't know when he's coming back. If he's coming back this series, it seems like he's going to be coming back soon. But the interesting thing is when Hassan's guarding Joel, they try to space the floor and have Joel shoot threes. This year on the season, he's shooting 31% from downtown. But when against the Miami Heat, that was something like 50%. He loved shooting threes and pulling Hassan Whiteside out of the paint. And that's a really tough question for Eric Spoelstra is, do I go big with Hassan and get an angry Joel Embiid and a motivated Joel Embiid? Or do I go small for long stretches with James Johnson Kelly Olynyk, I wouldn't say small, but James Johnson, Bam Adebayo. Do I want to have Hassan Whiteside out there? Rob, what do you think?
I mean, I would err on the side of less Whiteside, just because in general I find the Heat to be less effective that way. The spacing that Olynyk gives them is so valuable. The passing, his off-ball movement, he just fits a lot more of what they do. And, on top of what you mentioned in terms of motivating Joel to kind of kick to an extra level, having him with that extra motivation, unless you're sensing that it's kind of taking the Sixers out of their stuff, which is possible, if Joel kind of gets locked into that matchup and wanting to beat Hassan Whiteside one-on-one, that could potentially work to the Heat's advantage. But it's such a tough thing where, when you run a traditional center against another, really big, imposing center, and you're not getting a lot out of your guy, which Whiteside can be really productive. He's obviously a great rebounder. But in terms of the offense that he would bring to that series, I think it would just handicap the Heat to a point where I don't know that they could keep up. And the Sixers are such an explosive team when they have their best players on the floor. The Heat are going to struggle. It's kind of what they do. They churn through a lot of offense, but they don't necessarily produce a lot out of it. And so I wouldn't want to handicap myself in that way necessarily. I want to put more points on the board than relying on Hassan Whiteside for big minutes.
Yeah. I always see you see things through numbers. I always am wondering, like, what are the coaches doing right now? And you gotta think that if you're Eric Spoelstra, this is a unique situation where you're not expected to do much, but you're in a really interesting position because you're playing a team that just has, other than JJ and Amir Johnson, no real experience, certainly no primary ball handler on that team or primary scorer has any experience. The head coach has no experience. Miami has been in a bunch of tussles this year. Mm-hmm. In fact, I was watching that game last night. Pretty amazing what Wayne Ellington was able to do. That coaching staff is thinking, if we can just make this game mud, right? Mm-hmm. Philly wants to fly. Miami's comfortable playing in the mud. They're a bunch of mudders from old Seinfeld days. Jade will get that reference. Mother was a mother, father was a mudder. They just need to muck it up and make Philly have to make plays late in games with a stress they've just never even come remotely close to experiencing. And I understand that Miami doesn't have a lot of on-court experience in big games either, absent, of course, Wade County, whatever he does. But there's no pressure on them. So I just feel like that what is Spoelstra going to do to screw it up and get into Simmons' head? The Embiid story, actually, you make a great point. If you can get Embiid to be thinking only me and not we, that's a win. So that's what I'm really excited about. And maybe this is one of the 2 or 3 most interesting of the 8 in that head game between the coaches of what can they do to get Simmons second guessing himself. He's pretty sure of himself right now, and get Brett Brown maybe questioning some things. Spoelstra is used to being on the other foot, right? How many games, Tom, did he have to coach where, it was almost like he'd be fired if he didn't win? Obviously, he wouldn't be fired in the playoffs, but that's what it felt like. And the shoes on the other foot, that's what makes it, to me, a real dramatic. I think it's going to get a chance to be a long series because of that.
So the 76ers have won 16 straight games coming into the playoffs, and I don't think it's going to be an easy series for them. No. Just objectively, from big picture, a team coming into the playoffs winning 16 straight, I don't think this is over in 5. I'm calling it Philly in 6. Miami with the question mark of Joel Embiid's health. I think Eric Spoelstra's intelligence and his IQ in these moments, that advantage against Brett Brown, that experience. I think this is going 6. Rob?
I'd even go 7. And I think, you guys both touched on, I think the matchup in this series to watch is Simmons versus Spoelstra in terms of Simmons in his first playoff series ever against a creative coach who has a lot of defensive options, a lot of different guys to throw at him, different coverage they could play with in terms of how much room to give Simmons. This is going to be an interesting playoffs for a lot of reasons. And it's Ricky Rubio's first playoffs. Rajon Rondo's back in the playoffs again. A lot of kind of non-shooters in pivotal roles, and Simmons in the most pivotal role of all of those guys. And so how the Heat play into that, where I don't think they're no matter who they played against, I don't think it would be an easy series. They're so good defensively. They have so many good guys on the perimeter who can switch between a couple of different spots to give you a lot of different looks, a lot of different options. They tend to push everyone a little off balance just because it's so hard to get used to. As soon as you're used to playing against Josh Richardson, then you have Tyler Johnson, or then you have James Johnson, or then you're driving, but Hassan Whiteside's there. And so there's always an extra layer. There's always an extra nuance to what they do because of their versatility that I really like. And I agree that I think the inexperience here is going to play a big factor, especially when you're talking about a team that has all of that variety. And it's, the playoffs, your ability to succeed depends so much on your ability to counterpunch and respond to things. And the Sixers have the personnel to respond to a lot of different things, but whether they'll know instinctively how to get to those things is going to be really interesting to watch.
We've talked about it before here, Coach. I'm not scared by the inexperience of Philly. I'm not. I look at that Magic team with Shaq and Penny, and I see a lot of resemblance here. But the Miami Heat are going to make them work. Any last thoughts on this series before we move on?
I just said a 6, and I mean, to me, it's impossible to guess the numbers. It always is impossible, in my opinion. But when a player at the level of Joel Embiid is an unknown, it's just such a crazy guessing game. But my initial instinct was at least 6 if Embiid was totally healthy for every game. But I tend to think it's going to be a 7-game series because of that variable. And honestly, if Miami won the series, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Back-to-back listeners, I got a deal for you. Buying tickets to sports and concerts can be complicated and confusing, but there is a better way to buy with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to every type of live event, whether you're searching for a last-minute deal, planning a night out, or you need to find the perfect gift for your girl or your guy. SeatGeek is there to help you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. There's nothing quite like seeing your favorite team or musician in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone, and it's by far the easiest way I've found to shop for tickets. I can be anywhere, and with just a few taps, I can instantly find seats. I actually just use SeatGeek to buy tickets for my friends to see LeBron in the flesh. So SeatGeek is super nerdy. It's in the title, geek, and it saves time and money by searching for multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find amazing deals. It's color-coded. You don't have to do the math. I don't have to get out my well-worn calculator. I don't have to do all that stuff. It does the hard work for me. SeatGeek grades every ticket based on value to help you immediately identify the best seats that fit your budget. And every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. Make SeatGeek your go-to app for finding the best deals on every type of ticket, from sports to concerts to comedy and theater. So, all my listeners here on the Back-to-Back pod, you get $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code B2B. That's B, the number 2B. Promo code B2B for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Go geek out with me. Washington, guys. I'm picking Washington.
Wow. Are you really?
I really am. Washington in 7. That's my hot take. In the season matchup 2-2, they split the series. The point differential was 0.2 in the Raptors' favor. That's not why I'm picking the series. I'm picking because John Wall didn't play in any of them. John Wall played 0 games against the Raptors this season. He played against 24 different teams. He didn't play a single one against Toronto, missing it with, knee injuries throughout the year. I think that's crazy. We haven't seen John Wall, much this season. It hasn't been great, but against the Washington Wizards, the Toronto Raptors, he hasn't played at all. It was basically a stalemate between the two teams in the regular season. I think I might be a little crazy for making this pick, but then again, this is the recipe for a 1-8 matchup, is that you have a guy coming back from injury, John Wall, so maybe they're a little under performing this season. You have a 43-39 team as an 8 seed. So this isn't just your doormat 8 seed that we see in the Eastern Conference year after year. I mean, this team could have been a 5 seed pretty easily. So I think this is going to be a really tight series. I don't expect many people to be on this bandwagon, but Washington Wizards in 7. I'm going there.
Good luck.
Yeah, I'm not joining that bandwagon. I'm waving goodbye politely and snickering behind your back.
Oh man. All right. So the question is this team, the Washington Wizards, just tired of this shit? Or are they not in it? Are they too much drama? I don't know what you call it between Bradley Beal and John Wall. You guys are big believers in the Raptors. They've obviously won almost 60 games this year. You're not buying any of that I said?
Go ahead, Coach.
Yeah, let me jump on this one. I mean, it's amazing. No, of course you're right that it's incredible that they played all those times and Wall never played 1 minute. And again, like I said with Embiid in the last series, we're not talking about a role player here. This is a star player, so it adds another dimension. There's just so many question marks, Tom, to just bank on that team. Although I thought the Wizards would be really good this year, and it's unfair to really judge them based on with Wall being out. I look at it this though. I'm not a guy that ever really believes a good team has to win game 1 of a playoff series. I don't, having done this for 10 years at ESPN, there was plenty of times where the team I picked to win the series lost game 1, and they still won the series. If they were the better team, you get through that. This is one of those series though where I don't feel confident Toronto is going to be able to handle it if they lose game 1. They have to win game 1. The crowd is going to be so frenetic, and if the Wizards can jump on them early, or the Raptors are up 12 and all of a sudden Wizards go up 3 late third, it's going to be Panic City. And so in breaking down the games today, watching Lowry, when he's just real confident, even if he's missing shots, and just that bulldog. I was talking to my son last night. I'm helping my son work on identity as a player. And he's not going to be Russell Westbrook, the world's best athlete at point guard, ever. But you can be like Kyle Lowry. He's athletically average. He's just got a toughness about him that isn't just physical. It manifests itself very much so mentally. And yet we've seen him really be, just lost it in the playoffs. DeRozan's a separate issue. If Lowry just keeps that bravado, keeps that machismo that really helps him during the course of the regular season, I think they can win this series in 5 games. Game 1 worries me. If you're a Raptors fan, game 1 worries me that if they lose and he and DeRozan play poorly again, and that record starts again where, oh my God, they lose game 1, we're just going to be an unachieving team. Yeah, I think they're in a lot of trouble, and I don't know what happens to Dwayne Casey, who may be coach of the year, but he won't be the first coach of the year to ultimately get fired.
I think I'm convincing you, Coach. I think I'm convincing you.
Yeah, no, they got to play well in game 1. I just think they will. You don't think they will. I do. I think they are going to play great in game 1. And I don't know that Lowry and DeRozan will play great, but they've got more weapons they have before. And Valanciunas has improved. Obviously, their bench, they've got some really good offensive lineups. They can also guard, of course, with multiple different lineups. So I favor Toronto. I just think, unlike any other series, game 1 is what I'm really looking for.
Rob, why am I crazy?
I mean, I definitely err on the side of kind of a 5-game series with this as well. The Raptors are so frustrating to me because there have been points this season where I really thought they had a pretty decent chance to get out of the East. And there have been points this season where I thought there's just no way this team can get over the hump in terms of beating teams like the Cavs and things like that. And the variance there is just their commitment to the new habits that they've established this season, where I think overall they've been quite good in terms of sticking to those things kind of once they got into their rhythm. But you'll see the blips, you'll see the late game situations sometimes, you'll see some defaulting on their old style, on their old habits. And that's where, as Coach brought up, this game 1 is going to be pretty vital in terms of making sure that they stick to their stuff, that they're really committed to going all the way with moving the ball, with shooting threes, with, really balancing things out. to play a more modern style. Because if you want to play the way the Raptors have played previously, I think the Wizards can counter that pretty effectively. But if you're going to be kind of a more dynamic team, I just don't trust Washington. There aren't enough players on their roster that I trust to be, competent playoff performers. I don't really trust, the way Wall fits back into this offense. They haven't been quite as good with him on the floor this season as I would have liked, given the continuity of that core. That's kind of why you would lean on the idea of bringing all those guys back. And certainly there are some financial reasons why they had to do that and why they aren't very flexible from a cap standpoint. But the continuity that you have in keeping a lineup together, the Wizards don't really have any of the benefits of those things. They don't play like a team that really knows each other than, there's some pick and roll stuff between Wall and Gortat that works. There are a couple little nuances, but they really aren't a team that has that kind of vibe. And so the kind of the competing forces within the Wizards roster and rotation, and even between, what Wall does best and what the team did well when he wasn't on the floor, and then wanting to continue some of those things potentially, there just isn't a lot there for me to lean on and say, okay, these are the things that I really trust Washington to do effectively on a night-to-night basis against not only one of the best teams in the NBA this season, but what's also been a really good defense as well. And, this Toronto team, I think, is underrated in a lot of ways still. Even though we like to pick at them, we like to, really criticize them and judge their smallest changes and habits. But they are a team that's been, out and out one of the best in the league this season. And I think they deserve a lot of benefit of the doubt against a team like the Wizards that has just been so flaky.
0. That's my big number, the number of games that John Wall has played. But I will say, although John Wall hasn't played, or they haven't played as well as you would hope with John Wall on the floor, they've been -1 per 100 possessions with Bradley Beal playing without John Wall. They've been plus 3.7 with John Wall on the floor, and then plus 4.4 with both of those guys on the floor. I think the whole they're better without John Wall thing was totally overblown. Right. I think their on-court chemistry isn't perfect, but they're a better team with both of those guys on the floor. They were 23-18 this season with John Wall on the floor and basically 500 with him off. There isn't this idea that he's killing this team and that he's I hate using the word a cancer, but I think that's overblown.
Right, but Tom,
agree. Yeah.
But Tom, you just said it. They're 23-18 with both on the floor, and that's against the entire league. Now they're playing the best team in the East. So what you're really saying is you don't believe in Toronto. That's what you're saying.
I don't believe in DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry as much as I would have liked in the postseason. Like regular season versus postseason, I haven't seen it in the same way that I haven't seen it from the Wizards, like Rob was saying, is that I don't trust a lot of the guys on the Wizards, but I also don't trust a lot of the guys in Toronto to perform in the postseason. We certainly haven't seen it. And certainly not in game one.
But we didn't see it from LeBron in the finals until we did. We didn't see it from Dirk in the finals until we did, right?
No doubt.
That's the history of the postseason. You're right. Those guys need to play better. And if they don't do it after this year when they are the best team in the East and they've been so good and done so many great things, then it's a big problem. They win by 25 in game one. They're going to feel like, okay, here we go. This is not the past, which it isn't. Unless they think it is. That'd be a mistake.
I tweeted earlier today which East matchup in terms of seeds is the most likely upset. Just about everyone picked Boston losing to the Milwaukee Bucks. Do you guys agree? Like that do you think is the most likely upset, or are you expecting Milwaukee to walk away with that series?
I think that absolutely Boston has a good chance of winning that series. Milwaukee's kind of predictable. And we all know where Antetokounmpo is going to go. Boston knows too, and they've got a couple wing defenders that can give them some trouble and some big guys inside that add more trouble. And I don't think Milwaukee really knows who they are. They're Brad Stevens wins that coaching battle. And I also wouldn't pick Milwaukee to be the most likely upset. I actually think Spoelstra, his guys might be the best team to pull an upset. But whatever, it's intriguing in some respects because what Brad does with his guys, the amount of wins they have without not just Hayward but then of Kyrie is a testament to what a coach can do for his team. There's not a whole lot of guys that do it, but he's one of them.
Yeah, Rob, here's my big number. Minus 24.3. That's the Celtics net rating with Al Horford off the floor against Milwaukee this season. The offense plummeted from a 110 to 87. And in the 53 minutes when Horford went to the bench, the Bucks outscored Boston 122 to 95, shooting 56% from the floor, 48% from deep, and 64% from the line. Bottom line, guys, let's give some love to Al Horford. Because everyone's giving a lot of shit to Boston for not having Kyrie Irving. Oh, my God, they're not going to have Marcus Smart. But Al Horford, he is such a good player. I think, generally speaking, the enlightened NBA fan or NBA Twitter or just the people who listen to his pod appreciate Al Horford's gifts. But, man, if he's healthy, I think they have a really great chance in this series. I'm going to go with Boston in 7, and it's a lot to do with the fact that Al Horford's going to get more minutes. He's really good, and if Terry Rozier's back out there, I think that's going to be a really good matchup for Boston because, hey, Brad Stevens, he's made an omelet. I mean, he's done an amazing job with what the kind of cards that he's been given this season. So I got Boston in 7. Rob, what do you think about this series here?
I like Boston as well. And some of it's, exactly what you just laid out with Horford, which is if you're looking for a kind of a blueprint for what you want to do against Milwaukee's defense to get the kinds of shots you want to get, Horford is the guy you want facilitating. He's the guy you want triggering your side-to-side ball movement, getting the ball to those shooters in the corners, finding guys, other bigs inside who are ducking in for dunks and things. He's really the piece that makes that all work. And so, yes, Boston is a very vulnerable team. Sure, their offense is going to look really ugly at times, but Milwaukee's one of the worst defensive teams in the league if you can kind of break them down in that way. And so I think ultimately the Celtics are going to be it's going to be probably a pretty ugly series from their side of the ball. I don't think it's going to look great, but I think we are primed for sort of an Al Horford appreciation week in terms of his plus minus numbers being off the chart, in terms of his assists being great as always. This isn't a series where he's going to get really just kind of bullied and bodied by some other giant center or giant power forward that can really expose kind of where the limitations in his game are. Having a great team defender like that in the middle against Giannis is going to help, in addition to what Coach said, in terms of having, the variety of perimeter defenders to throw at Giannis potentially, and all guys who are not, slight of frame necessarily. Yeah. Even Jason Tatum has a pretty solid build to him, and, it's not the kind that's going to withstand a Giannis fast break necessarily. But when you're looking at just the multiple defenders to wear Giannis down over the course of a game and a series, when he's going to have to do a lot, I think the Celtics have a really good shot here. It wouldn't totally surprise me if the Bucks were able to get some ground and really get some things going, but I think the Celtics have a lot to work with.
Let me throw 2 quick things at you guys. Only one has to do with the NBA. Tom likes to boast about his Demon Deacon roots and their basketball pedigree of Timmy and Chris.
Yeah, that's about it. Okay, yep.
Yeah, right. Randolph Childress. How about Billy Donovan's team that, in my opinion, is the best college team of all time? He had an offense where he had Al Horford and Joakim Noah at the 4 and 5. And they had a defense with those 2 guys. Not to forget about Corey Brewer, who was MVP in one of those Final Fours, who was a McDonald's All-American. The other 2 weren't. But I remember this very well watching those teams back then. Horford and Noah are 2 of the most gifted big men passers and playmakers as we've seen in a long time in the NBA. I mean, Blake Griffin's amazing. We have our group. Jokic is incredible. But I've always known Horford was incredible on that end, and as well as defensively and IQ, and also a great leader. So that brings me to another point on Horford. I've always felt like in the NBA, I don't have a vote on this, but I think the MVP voting is stupid. I think it should be MOP. I think it should just be most outstanding player. Because if we really just looked at most valuable player and got beyond statistics, I think Horford would be the MVP of the league, based on what you just said, Tom. I've said that for a couple of months. He's the true MVP if we looked at value added rather than just production. So that's all I have to say about that.
I love that. That is a scorching hot take, but I love it. I was thinking about it this morning in regards to Russell Westbrook having averaging the triple-double, and how the box score. Maybe I should write this story. What would we do if we just took away the box score and players, coaches, media, we could not have a box score and we just let them play 82 games, how would the different games change? How would Russell Westbrook play in last night's game if he didn't need 16 rebounds? How would he play if he didn't even know that there was an averaging triple-double possibility? And the same way.
Not only that, Tom, but in watching, I actually watched them play last night and recently. They're just an intriguing team. If you're thinking about, again, I always see things from a coaching point of view, and you're preparing for the Celtics, and Horford is just all over the place in your preparation on both ends.
Right.
And all of it is negative, meaning I'm coaching against him. It's positive if you're a Boston fan. For a guy going against him, it's negative because it's just positives for him everywhere. And with Westbrook, as many incredible things as he does, and he was amazing last night in terms of his rebounding and his passing and his effort. It really was. I was watching with my son, but I mean, like 5 different times he and I said, oh, he's just fucking terrible because he makes some of the dumbest decisions you could possibly imagine. And so if you're going against him, you want the ball in his hands down the stretch. They've lost. Look at their record in the last like 5 weeks or so since Brewers started, and they played so well. I don't think they've lost by more than 4. They might have had a lead, I think, in all those games. I think they had a fourth quarter lead, and he just takes terrible shots or makes terrible passes. Again, primary ball handlers can't do that. And so to do what you said, take away the box score and just look at impact on wins.
Yeah. Smart
as much
moves,
as Westbrook's incredible, he's also a nightmare for his own team.
And it could be worse. I think one thing that the box score does in his case is I think it kind of gives him a certain veil with teammates where guys like Paul George, guys like Carmelo Anthony and Steven Adams, I think the players around the league have a respect for Russ in a way that if the box score didn't exist, they might think of him very differently.
Yeah,
because if you're just watching him play and especially if you're his teammate, and you're watching the pull-up jumper after pull-up jumper, the ill-advised threes, the mistakes on passing that Coach mentioned, I think you would feel very differently about those things if they don't have the weight of, oh, this is a guy who can literally average a triple-double, who's been, a scoring champion in the league, who's, has these certain things that kind of elevate his stature. I know that, if I were playing on a team with a guy like that, I would probably feel pretty differently about it.
Yeah.
Speaking of Russ, the big number on OKC Utah, guys, 94.9. That's the Jazz offensive rating when Andre Robertson was guarded by, Donovan Mitchell was guarded by Andre Robertson. Right. Wow. So the Jazz offensive rating was basically 95 when Robertson was guarding Mitchell. When all other OKC defenders were guarding Mitchell, they were scoring 106 points per 100 possessions, and the second most common defender for Donovan Mitchell in the regular season, according to Second Spectrum data, was Russell Westbrook. And in those possessions, the Jazz had a field day, 134 points per 100 possessions when Russell Westbrook was guarding Donovan Mitchell. Now with your guy, Corey Brewer, Corey Brewer, we don't know what's happening with him, the injury. We don't know what's going on.
Okay.
He thinks
he should
so?
Be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's a scary thing for OKC is that they haven't played the Jazz in this formation. The last time they played the Jazz was December 23rd when they were 15-19. So they haven't seen the Jazz rip-roaring through the league for the last 4 months. They haven't played. They're 3-1 against the Utah Jazz, and Robertson's not going to be out there to neutralize Donovan Mitchell and kind of organize that defense. Guys, I pick the Utah Jazz in 6 in this series. Does Robertson, what OKC player is the most important in the series? Now that Robertson's out, is it Melo? Is it Russ? Is it PG finding his 3-point stroke? How do we tilt the favor for OKC? I got Utah Jazz in 6, but how does OKC win it?
I tell you who I think there's 2 really. I mean, obviously everyone has a role to some degree, and the defense can dictate to some degree just how much of a role that is. But down the stretch, the 2 guys that have jumped off the page to me with that team has been Steven Adams and Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant is fucking unbelievable now. Unbelievable. He is shooting the ball better and with confidence. He's always been a great shot blocker for his position. Donovan's playing him now at the 5 a lot. And he recognizes nobody can stop him from getting to the rim. And unlike previous versions of Grant, he's got strength now. He's a big, strong kid. He's not just a skinny athlete. He's just finishing around people. And it's almost like he's realizing, hey, wait a second, I can shoot the three and drive and score. That makes me hard to guard. He's starting to assert himself and becoming he's made a bunch of important plays for them down this last 3 weeks that probably more in 3 weeks than he has in his career for a team. And then with Brewers, as long as Corey's fine, which he texted last night, he thought it'd be fine for game one. As long as he's making corner threes to a decent degree, which he has been, Steven Adams becomes a monster because you have to stay home on shooters on Adams Westbrook pick and rolls. And Adams has a nice little baby hook, both hands. He has a nice little floater. Of course, he's a monster inside. He is going to the Gobert-Adams matchup's incredible because Adams is so physically powerful and skilled enough now to take advantage of both physical size and craft that he's one of the few guys that can give Rudy some problems because he doesn't just have to rely on skill versus Rudy. He can beat him up a little bit physically. I think it's going to be, I think it's the best series in round one overall. I don't know who I'd favor yet, but I think it's going to go 7.
Yeah, the Utah Jazz, the most used lineups in that series against OKC, 4 games. Only one lineup has played 18 minutes or more in 4 games. It's going to be a totally different series than what we saw in the regular season.
Yeah.
Totally different. And that's a common theme in all of these matchups this year is there's so many question marks. John Wall didn't play in any of those games. Right. Boston's got a new team. Even Philly, we don't know what's going to happen with Embiid. And in this OKC Utah series, we just don't have that many lineups to go off of. If you're watching tape, they're going to be guys who aren't with the team anymore. Jay Crowder playing at the 4 is total game changer for Utah. Joe Ingles, I just think Utah is stacked. I think they've got great scoring in Donovan Mitchell. I think Ricky Rubio is a really tough defender. It's very hard to score against them. And if they didn't blow it last night, I'd get a steak from Zach Lowe for picking Utah Jazz having over 48 wins, a pick I made in July. So I am really upset about Utah Jazz dropping that game against Portland. Damian Lillard, you're too good, man.
He's too good. I watched the game, yeah.
So,
all right. Go ahead. I have more to say, but I want Rob to chime in, then I'll add something else.
Yeah, I think you guys touched on it exactly, which is that we haven't seen this matchup yet. And to counter or to build on Tom's big number, how about another one, 9, which is the number of possessions that Paul George has spent guarding Donovan Mitchell at all this season. Oh. And that might be their most interesting look, where if you want to, my thought is if you're trying to slow the Jazz, you want to put somebody as long and as pesky on Mitchell as you possibly can. Paul George is a guy who can slink around screens, who could give him a lot of trouble potentially, but you also need to be sure that you have enough other things going on offensively where he can really dedicate himself and dig into that. And I think this is a series where things could get really weird, and I think Quinn Snyder is a big reason why. And some bits, as Coach meant to do, if Brewer is hitting his corner threes, it kind of changes the series a little bit. But I think that the Jazz would stick with it. I think they would still give him those shots and trust the percentages to level out in their favor because that's the kind of coach that Quinn, I think, historically has been in terms of a guy who will trust those things to kind of work out. And I think the matchups could get pretty strange. I think you could see, if you're trying to figure out where to put Derek Favors, could you put him on Brewer and help off a lot? Could you put, especially if you're talking about wanting to have a big pick and roll tag guy, Steven Adams is so big and so strong. If you're, Donovan Mitchell or Ricky Rubio coming over to tag him on a pick and roll, I don't know that you're really doing anything. Do you want to have a bigger body there as the second line of defense, even when Rudy Gobert is out of position? And with Russell Westbrook, do you want Mitchell on him? Do you want Rubio on him? Both of whom are really good off-ball players as well in terms of playing for steals, playing a different kind of defensive role. I think the Jazz have a lot of flexibility in terms of how they want to manage those matchups. And you could look at it from the Thunder perspective as well in terms of, how much of an emphasis do you want to put on getting Carmelo Anthony going in this series, and how much of an operative role do you think he's really going to play? Because that's kind of a flex spot in terms of if you want to make the Jazz go bigger or smaller, that's kind of the place where you would do it. And Jeremy Grant, as Coach said, plays a big role in that as well. He's been really tremendous for them, and I think a part of some of their more, their more constructive and their more effective lineups overall. So how both of these coaches kind of manage which lineups are the best for them in this series, give them the best chance, how to tweak those matchups within them. It's part of what makes the dance of this so interesting. Well,
and one other thing, I agree with Tom that Utah is stacked. I'm a huge fan of Quinn's my coach of the year if I had a vote for what he's accomplished. But I can't ignore Oklahoma City in what's been a tremendous West to get home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs after their terrible start. They finally put things together. Robertson is an elite defensive player, right? Can we agree?
Yes.
In terms of
100%.
perimeter defender.
Might be the best perimeter defender in the
might
NBA.
be the best. I would say top 3 this year with Kawhi not playing. They lose him, and it's not that Corey Brewer is this amazing player. As much as I love the young man, I've always worked at being very objective in my role as an analyst. I know his faults. In fact, I guarantee you I know him better than anyone on the planet. But he's just so much better than all the other guys they had to fill Robertson's spot because those guys just don't know how to play. It's not that Corey's more skilled necessarily. He's just a much better basketball player. Watch Corey Brewer play, and you'll almost never see a selfish possession from him. It doesn't exist. That's one reason why those Gator teams were so great. Noah Horford and Brewer, man, they just wanted to kick your motherfucking ass. They didn't care who did it. They didn't care who scored. They just wanted us to score, not me to score. And that's exactly how he plays in Oklahoma City. And he's always flying. There was a couple plays yesterday. It's funny, the announcers at Oklahoma City were praising Russell Westbrook for getting a rebound and then without dribbling, just chucking it up the floor. And Corey caught a long pass and dunked it the way he used to get those like every half from Kevin Love. I don't think it's but the second one Westbrook's thrown all year, and they acted like he's been doing it every other possession. But Corey's always going to race, and he's always going to make the simple play, and he knows when to cut, and he knows when to get out of the way. He almost never takes a bad shot, and that's just all they needed. Those other guys are just young, and so now they can play a little bit of a role when they come in, and that's fine. But the Oklahoma City has really recovered from what looked like a disastrous start and then a disastrous injury and managed to get home court advantage. That's why I think it's such a great series. We know what Utah has done. I think Rob is right that they're probably going to let Corey shoot corner threes, and they won't be the first team to do that. And yeah, certainly in the playoffs. And Billy's got some interesting things to do against Gobert because of what Jeremy Grant's been able to do. It's not like Gobert's going to overpower Grant and score in the low post off the jump hook. So, and Grant, he's going to force Rudy to come out and guard him. So, yeah, I think Rob's right about the different middle matchups we'll see. To me, if I'm picking Utah to win, it would be because I don't trust Russell in fourth quarter decisions. I just don't. I think the worst thing for Oklahoma City is the Thunder, in my opinion, and I don't have access to second spectrum anymore. They lead, to my eyes, they lead the league in bad shots taken. And I think Utah leads the league in forced bad shots to take. That's a bad combination for OKC. If they can share the ball and play their game the way it should be played, make easy plays, I think they have the talent to win in 6 or 7 games. I worry with Russell that they won't do that. I hope he proves me wrong for his sake.
There was a great stat from the Second Spectrum breakdown at ESPN.com that Utah Jazz, believe it or not, get the most open shots of any team in the NBA.
Yeah.
They move the ball. They move the ball a lot, and they get open shots. And Joe Ingles is shooting 44% from 3 at high volume this year. I mean,
that's Quinn Snyder's thing, by the way, Tom. His whole philosophy, I learned this a couple years ago, is we'll be more engaged defensively if everyone gets touches offensively. And I didn't agree with it 2 years ago. I thought that there was other ways to get people to defend, but I can't argue with the results anymore. They're getting great shots offensively, and obviously they really guarded. Yes, it helps to have the Rudy Gobert at the rim, of course, the best defensive player probably in the world now. But I can't argue with his philosophy, and it's worked great. And then give him credit for allowing Donovan Mitchell to take over as a rookie. Now, if he can do it in the postseason, it's a huge question mark. But what Quinn has done with that philosophy of move the ball, everyone gets touches, and then we're going to let you do that as long as you promise to defend with every cell in your body. It's worked.
That OKC starting lineup with Robertson was plus 41 in 66 minutes against Utah this season. Plus 44 in 66 minutes. If they can get a reasonable facsimile of Robertson there with Corey Brewer, man, I mean, that was a long time ago. That plus 44 was a long time ago, and it was a different Utah Jazz team with Jay Crowder not on the roster and Donovan Mitchell not as confident probably back then. But right now, I got Utah in 6 in that series. Rob, I want you to take me to the next series. Which one do you want to talk about?
Let's talk Blazers Pelicans.
Oh, yes. The Rookie of the Year battle between Anthony Davis and Dame Lillard, yeah.
The Rookie of the Year battle, everyone's debating.
Everyone's still debating, yes.
Are you guys – I haven't got your opinions on Rookie of the Year.
Simmons.
I got Simmons too.
Me too, okay. Moving on.
I think defensively, Simmons, I think that's the tiebreaker for me, and that's a little harder to quantify. But anyway, so Portland, New Orleans, what do you think, Rob?
This is one where, I mean, I really have a lot of faith in what Portland has been this season in terms of their defense, but this is a series I think could be pretty challenging for them, just because Davis is such a unique threat. And it's a tough one because I think Al-Farouq Aminu has done an incredible job defensively this year, and he's the exact kind of guy you would want to put on Davis potentially in terms of
go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of length, very mobile, able to contest him in a variety of ways. But just the difference between being a very good defender and being a force of nature is kind of where the series could turn. And that's just something that if I were the Blazers, I would be very worried about. Even knowing that there are certain guys on the Pelicans I'm just not going to have to really guard that closely, knowing that their rotation is a little bit short, just that explosive potential from Davis where, I think it's been talked about in a lot of different spaces that he's not necessarily the most consistent superstar in the world, but he can just be so devastating when they're able to get him the ball in the right spots. And that between Holiday and Rondo, I think they have, the playmaking potential to get there consistently enough. I just, you obviously wonder how much of the Pelicans can be able to slow the Blazers. And maybe that's, if we get the Rondo that chased and hounded and slowed Isaiah Thomas for a couple playoff games last year, and he's doing the same thing to CJ McCollum or Dame Lillard. And then you have Drew Holiday, who's an all-defense candidate this season for good reason, doing the same thing to the other guy. I think this thing could equalize pretty fast for a 3-6 matchup.
Yeah, I think so too. I'll ask you guys this question: name me the 2 players that can change the series by themselves that are on the 5 through 8 seed. Who would you say? Davis is one, right? Mm-hmm. And who's the other? We've already talked about it.
Joel Embiid? You're talking about 5 through 8 seed?
The one guy that can turn the tide because he's just the best player on the court. Basically what I call being LeBron James. He made every team he was on just so much better.
Oh, Giannis probably?
Right.
Yeah.
Those 2 guys can just go superhuman, right?
Yep.
They don't got to do it for 7 games. They probably just have to do it for maybe 2 or 3 and hope the team steals a win. Because maybe the opponent plays badly, or you have a Wayne Ellington situation where someone shoots makes a bunch of threes. I think he had 5 1/4 last night in the fourth. Davis is, he can put up a 40-20 game, and that's probably going to be a win. And then he could do a 39-18 game. And by the way, he's a great defensive player too. I think that's what I'm most excited about watching Anthony Davis in this postseason than I am anything else in the postseason. So I just can't wait to watch what he can do. When he decided to go Westbrook mode, he became one of my favorite 3 players in the league.
I covered that series against the Warriors with him, and it was so much fun. I mean, seeing the coming out party for Anthony Davis was great. And I think it's going to be fun to watch him. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised. This is a really good defense. Since the All-Star break, I think they're a top 5 defense.
Portland?
No. New Orleans has actually played a really good defense in the second half of the year. It's been crazy, the lineups with Mirotic, Emeka Okafor, the injuries, of course, with Boogie. But you look in this series, if you wanted to look at film or data, there just isn't anything really there on the Pelicans side against the Blazers. In the series, the 4-game series, there have been 58 different lineups that the Pelicans have played. 4 of them have played in 2 of those games. 4 of the 58 played in another game, and then 0 after that. So the Blazers, if you're looking at film, like what do we do when New Orleans? How does this matchup gone against New Orleans? There really isn't any tape. There really isn't any tape. A lot of it has Boogie out there, and it changes the team so dramatically. But I think Anthony Davis is so good, he's going to get at least 2 or 3 wins just by himself, dropping 40 points or something crazy like that. And you could say the same thing about Damian Lillard. I just think there's more depth on the Blazers side. I got Blazers in 7 on this one.
Wow, we got a lot of great series coming up, don't we?
Yeah, and we got to run through the last few here, but Cleveland, Indiana, another one that we haven't seen a lot of games recently between these two teams. Cleveland's 1-3 against Indiana this season, but they haven't played since that trade. January 26th was the last matchup between Indiana and Cleveland. Last year is the closest sweep in NBA history. The Cavs swept the Indiana Pacers, but it was really, really close. Oladipo's a little bit banged up coming into this series. So is Rodney Hood. Rob, what do you think about LeBron? He played all 82 games. Are you worried about the Cavs in this series against Indiana, who pretty much have nothing to lose?
No, I'm not really worried about them. I mean, I'm worried about them in the extent that they might lose a game here or there, just because they're still kind of getting their stuff together. As you mentioned, they're still getting guys back and healthy. George Hill's been in and out, still trying to find his way in terms of where he fits there. I mean, you start every series against LeBron with the question of who guards him. And the Pacers have done a lot of funky stuff this season in terms of, trusting Bojan Bogdanovic in a lot of those spots and putting Oladipo off the ball. And that's one of those cases where I think it just overwhelms you in terms of what LeBron could create if they decide to put Bogdanovic on him. They could put Thaddeus Young on him. I don't know that I feel any better about that. I just don't feel about it from a, starting at square one matchup in terms of what you would want in a team to test or challenge LeBron or a LeBron team in any way. And I don't think the Pacers have it. I think they've had an amazing season, given where they started, given the personnel that they've had. Oladipo has been incredible. But sometimes you just run a series up against, somebody who's clearly in a different tier, and I think the Cavs are that.
Yeah, I mean, they got a good matchup. Cleveland did, and what I'm more curious about is just, can we start seeing some signs that Cleveland can play some high level defense? Mm-hmm. Because after this series, it's going to matter. And so, as much as I think Cleveland's got a good matchup here, if they aren't pushed and to figure out where they can go to play some defense against a team that's really got a great offensive lineup or is just playing great, I think it's going to spell a lot of trouble for them going forward.
Since the trade, Cleveland's defense ranks 20th in the NBA. The offense is second. Last year, they were 6th on offense in the second half of the year and 29th on defense, and they still got to the finals pretty easily. Defense isn't there. You're right, Coach. I don't know if the Indiana Pacers are loaded enough. Miles Turner has been playing really rough over the past couple weeks. I don't know if they have enough firepower to give Cleveland trouble on that end and have them lose sleep on that end of the floor. I'm glad that Ty Lue is back. We've talked about it here on the podcast where Griff had an amazing story about Ty Lue and how he doesn't really he keeps stuff in his back pocket. Come playoff time, he busts it out, and defensively, they're going to give a lot of different looks and have a lot better X's and O's defensively than you saw in the regular season. They're going to need it because I think this team, Indiana Pacers, have nothing to lose. I just wonder if they're going to just be happy to be there against the Cavs and be overwhelmed by LeBron. I don't think it's going to be a sweep. I actually have the Cavs getting pushed to 7. I don't know why. I think just maybe a little bit of hangover and a little bit of, hey, maybe we can flip the switch. We swept these guys last year. I think it gets pushed to 7. I don't feel great about that. But yeah, Cleveland, no one really expects this to be an upset, and I can see why. There's a guy named LeBron James on that Cleveland team. All right, so we talked.
One other thing, too, on that series is, as you brought up with Lou, I do think this series could be a good laboratory from that perspective in terms of Oladipo in particular. I think invites some very aggressive defensive pressure just because he's a guy who tends to really just burst through straight line drives, kind of go into double teams and try to create that way. And the Pacers don't really have a lot of supplementary playmaking to work around that. So if you want to kind of experiment with your pick and roll coverages, get things a little tighter in terms of if you want to be trapping guys later in the playoffs, if you want to be applying more ball pressure, I think this is a pretty good place to start. It's just a shame that the Pacers really don't have a lot of offense to counter that. And especially, a lot has been made this season. They're such a 2-point dependent team. They're, one of the lowest teams in the league in 3-point rate. And this is kind of, almost a mirror in a way if you look over in the West at, the Wolves and the Rockets, where the Wolves are a really good offense. And the Pacers this season have been a top 10 offense for most of the year. But when you're shooting twos against teams that are shooting threes at this level of firepower, the math just turns against you in such a harsh way.
Guys, I picked Washington over Toronto in the 1-8 matchup. But
you got Cleveland versus Washington in round 2?
Yes, I do.
All right, go on.
But in the West, guys, I do not have an upset at the 1-8 matchup. I actually have a sweep. Talk me out of it. Can you guys talk me out of picking Houston not in a sweep?
I will not.
Yeah. In the regular season matchup, they swept them 4-0. The margin was plus 63 for Houston. Jimmy Butler played, I don't know, probably 53 minutes last night. I don't know. But they played their hearts out last night. They played really, really hard. Taj Gibson had an amazing defensive stops against Jokic, poking the ball out multiple times down the stretch. A real gutsy win from a Tom Thibodeau team. I think they're tired. I think the Houston Rockets are going to run them out of the gym with Chris Paul. Here's my big number. Chris Paul and James Harden on the floor in the regular season against the Minnesota Timberwolves. They had a 129 offensive rating. They scored 129 points per 100 possessions, and that's basically what they scored for the entire season series against the Minnesota Timberwolves, which they're a pretty garbage defensive team. They are. People think Tom Thibodeau, they think Jimmy Butler, Taj Gibson, but they've been a pretty bad defensive team for a couple years running now, and I think the Houston Rockets are going to chew them apart.
Yeah, Houston's got a little edge to them, I think, going in for all the reasons that any real NBA fan knows. And what you said is what I would have thought all season is, when is Minnesota going to make that transformation defensively? And I watched them play last night. I mean, they really got lucky to win in a few different ways. I mean, but everyone gets lucky to win sometimes. But sure. Taj Gibson made a couple great defensive plays against Jokic in the last seconds. And he really risked fouling Jokic and tie games. Tie game in regulation.
They weren't calling that sixth foul, Coach. They were not calling that sixth foul against Taj.
Yeah, but I'm not arguing with you.
I'm saying
that if they do, then Jokic with 1 second on the clock goes to the line, and now Denver's playing in this game.
Exactly. What I'm saying is Taj was absolutely fouling him down the stretch, and they weren't calling it, which I don't know how fair that is, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's they barely made it. They celebrated. I get it. I'm happy for them. My buddy Jim Peterson is so happy, but I think Houston, they want to crush skulls. The only mistake D'Antoni's going to make is they'll be up 30 in game 1 with 6 to play in the fourth quarter, and he'll have his starters in rolling it up. And I wish he would just rest them. But obviously I don't know if they're going to win by 30 in game 1, but I wouldn't be surprised. I just feel like Houston is. Everyone wants to win every game. That's if you don't, you're not playing serious basketball or any serious sports. But what are you doing every day, right? What are you doing to prepare? All of the angst and pain that these Rockets guys have felt because of their own personal histories in the playoffs is, I think, going to help them lock in like these guys have never done before, and they're playing on the best team in the league right now, especially with knowing Golden State's struggling. So I think we're going to see Houston's best, and they're going to try to plant a seed in a sense right away in Minnesota that, hey guys, Minnesota's going to wake up and suddenly they're going to realize they're down 2-0 and they'll be down 15 in the third quarter at home, and they know this sweep is coming. Houston's looking to punch them right in the eyes.
Yeah, this is the blowout series, and it starts with Houston's an all-time great offense. And if you look at the ingredients you would need to be able to slow that team down, the Wolves have almost none of them. Other than you would say, putting Jimmy Butler on James Harden, okay, that's a good starting point. But they're going to run pick and roll after pick and roll. They're going to make the big guys step up to contain them. They're going to pull the defenders you don't want in the play into the play with all this really nice off-ball action. do you have the guys who are going to be able to make the rotation against Clint Capella? I think the regular season series showed us empirically they do not. Do they have, the extra next level rotation to be able to get to all the shooters you need to get to? I think the regular season series showed they clearly did not. And so even if you hold James Harden to, I think he only shot maybe 37% in the regular season series, and every game was still pretty much a blowout. And so
right.
that's just kind of the way it's going to go.
If he has a good game, what's that going to look like, right? Like if he's playing average basketball in James Harden's world, I mean, it's going to be a massive blowout.
It's just exceptionally hard to guard that team and everything they do, and to have all the pieces you need to take away all of their different elements that they could rely on. Where, worst case scenario, you're going against, even if you stop everything, you blow up every action, you cut off every pass. Oh, then you have the privilege of working against the most effective isolation team in NBA history. So good luck with that to the Wolves and to pretty much anyone else who plays them in the playoffs, because it's going to be a hell of a thing.
Luke Mbah-a-Moute, you need to stop dunking. You've gotten hurt twice this year dunking.
Yeah.
Just stop. Take the layup, please.
What's the latest on him?
Dislocated shoulder. He's going to be out for at least the first round, it seems.
That's a little bit worrisome going forward, but not probably in Series 1.
Not devastating. Not against this Minnesota Timberwolves team, which, by the way, the Rockets scored 3,768 points from downtown this year, and the Timberwolves had 1,974, a difference of 1,700 points from the three-point arc. That's a huge gap. And you've been on this all year long, Coach, is just how devastating it's going to be to guard Houston when they got it going. So,
yeah,
I mean, they've doubled up. They've had just about twice as many three-pointers as the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's like they're playing two different sports.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The Houston's, that elasticity of Houston where they can just waylay anyone. I mean, Golden State's had it in the past too. When they're cooking like that, I mean, nobody can really beat them probably this year. And I was reading today too, how, I don't know where I was reading it, but someone alluded to the fact that there were naysayers regarding the James Harden Chris Paul combination before the season started. And you probably have to resign in covering basketball if you thought those two guys couldn't play well together. Just what are you doing? It's Daryl. First of all, if you second guess, there's an old saying that if you're playing with a bunch of expert poker players, and you're not sure, who's in trouble, right? It's obviously you, of course. If you're not the expert, they may make it look like they don't know what they're doing, but that's part of what they're doing as experts. It's giving you some false confidence. If you're second guessing Daryl Morey and stuff like this, I think you're now realizing you need to get out of it, because he's not perfect, but with stuff like this, he's not making mistakes. He just isn't. If he's bringing Chris Paul and James Harden, first of all, I don't think it takes Daryl Morey. I think my daughter could figure this out. They are, I mean, who doesn't want multiple playmakers and multiple competitive dudes and a guy that plays defense in Chris Paul? And to Harden, so here's something, Tom, you're always big on, I'm with you 1,000% on it, on rest and not just minutes, but stress minutes. It'll be interesting to see how Harden does this year in the postseason, knowing he didn't have the same stress minutes as he's had in the past because of Chris Paul's ability to do a lot of things on offense, let Harden play off the ball.
100%. I think this is ideal, the situation between Chris Paul, James Harden coming into the playoffs, because they haven't needed that many clutch games, a lot of high-stress minutes. They won 65 games. There were a lot of fourth quarters where James Harden could rest or at least play at 50%. This is a total change from last year where he had to do everything for this team, and you saw in the playoffs he just hit a wall and couldn't play beyond that. Now, I will say Daryl Morey is not batting 1,000. You didn't say he was batting 1,000, but with the Dwight Howard, Omer Ashik thing, that did not work out. The Dwight Howard era did not go as well as Daryl Morey had hoped, but guess what? Now he's got Chris Paul and a 65-win team. Not many teams. You look at Atlanta, what they did when they were trying to retool after Dwight Howard, or you look at the Orlando Magic, what they had to do when they had to retool without Dwight Howard. And I don't know what Mitch Kupchat's going to do here in Charlotte with Dwight Howard, but the fact that Daryl Morey got rid of Dwight Howard and was able to produce a powerhouse that a lot of people think can take down a dynasty in the Golden State Warriors, is a testament to Daryl Morey's ability as a GM.
And if Horford is my MVP, as in my ranking system, Capella might be number 2.
So talk to me about Capella, who's nursing, I think, a little bit of a hurt hand, but he should be okay. Why do you love Clint Capella?
It just that role for that team. I think he leads the league in field goal percentage, and yes, I know most of them are dunks because of Harden and Paul. But he's able to do like DeAndre Jordan. He's able to jump to 13 feet, so everyone else is out of the play except for him. We know what he does defensively for them. He understands his role. He doesn't try to play out of his role. And absent him, now there are other players that could fill that position that just don't play on Houston's team. But what he does for them to make that pick and roll so devastating. I was telling you, Adam's ability to finish when Brewer's making corner threes and you got Carmelo and Paul George spotting up, the Westbrook-Adams pick and roll is unguardable because you can't solve it with just 2 guys. It's the same thing in Houston. Their willingness to shoot the 3 and spread the floor with 2 different playmakers with the ball in their hands, either Paul or Harden, and Capella running to 13 feet at the rim, makes that offense just literally unguardable because unless you're willing to just let them shoot threes and hope they miss, which is what teams might do, and just feel like, well, if they miss, we'll have a chance, and if they make it, we're going to lose anyway because if we guard that 3, they'll get dunks all the time, or Harden gets fouled all the time and scores. It's an unguardable offense, and I think D'Antoni literally said that it's unguardable. That's why they've gone ISO so much. ISO and ball screen with Harden and Paul and Capella are the best actions we've seen probably in the league.
You've written about it, Rob, the ISO offense, or at least the ISO reliance for the Houston Rockets. What makes it so devastating beyond just the fact that Chris Paul and James Harden are magicians and they have so much spacing? Do you think they can rely on that a whole bunch in the playoffs?
I think they'll have to in spots because teams are going to try to switch against them. And some of that is by nature of what coaches described. Just the way that their pick and roll is so unguardable to defend by traditional actions makes you want to do that because it's kind of your last resort. If you're not able to stick with Capella on the roll and hug the shooters and do all the things you need to do, that's really kind of your best option. And so you're going to, really force Harden and Paul to hit some tough shots, but they will because that's kind of what they do. And even, the way that both of those guys can manipulate bigs and really, challenge their footwork, challenge, the gap between them and their defender, they're just so effective at that. And a lot of it really comes from that punch of knowing that even if you cut off this one thing, there's always going to be the extra pass out to the 3-point shooter. If you help, if you double, if you shade, Chris Paul's one of the best in the league. And actually James Harden is too, doesn't get enough credit for it in terms of identifying which defenders are just a step out of position on the weak side of the floor, just a little bit too far away from Ryan Anderson or PJ Tucker or whoever it is that's sitting in the corner waiting for that 3. And I think what the Rockets have done so effectively is hammering into their guys that the second that ball hits your hands, you have to shoot. You have to take the shot because if you don't, it's going to change the complexion of everything we do. And so knowing that those attempts are going to come, that even, you may feel really good about the idea of PJ Tucker taking a lot of shots if you're playing against the Rockets, but that's a guy who's shooting 37% on threes this season and is going to be playing center in a lot of minutes.
I love PJ Tucker.
Really good. And the kids coming in, and this is the one area where I really hope that Luke is able to get back and healthy because their combination, what they're able to do defensively with both those guys on the floor and the way they've been able to kind of buoy their offense in spite of all that, Luke and PJ Tucker can't do is pretty amazing. And Mbah Moute, for the record, almost a 60% true shooting this season. Just has been a really effective offensive player within his role. A lot of counter driving against closeouts that's been really effective, doing a lot of little things that kind of fill the gaps of the Rockets offense. But everything works because it's counterbalanced so effectively. There's really no way you can load up or lean that's not going to come with some huge punishment.
And what they've done is they've eliminated the argument, and you can make the argument, but you won't sound very smart, that they take too many threes to win basketball games. Or they take too many threes to win a championship. They're too 3-point heavy because if you watch these guys play, a lot of this is just one-on-one. I'm going to surgically destroy you in a very throwback basketball way. It's not just a helter-skelter basketball. As we saw earlier this season, they had like the slowest pace, a lot of ISOs of any team in the league. So they can kill you by 1,000 different ways. I think that's a sweep. Let's go quickly wrap up. Golden State, San Antonio, 2-7 matchup. Warriors won 3-1 in the regular season, plus 26. The loss was when they rested all their guys and they scored something like 38 points the entire game. Curry is iffy. A little birdie told me that he might play in this series. I don't think it's going to be game 1. I don't think it's going to be game 2, but he is on the mend, right on target. I don't think they're going to need him in this series. I think they can win without him, but man, they're going to have to play better than what they have with Kevin Durant. Only no Steph on the floor. That's my big number. Here at 0.5, that's the Warriors plus minus per 100 possessions, so their net rating. With Kevin Durant playing without Steph Curry, in 1,000 minutes, they're only outscored opponents by 12 points. With Kevin Durant playing, guys, Kevin Durant playing with Klay Thompson and Draymond Green for most of that time, they've basically played like a 500 team without Steph Curry on the floor. So that is an odd stat. I don't know if that says much about the team, how they're going to perform in the playoffs. But if I'm Steve Kerr, please, thank God the playoffs are here because they're going to play motivated now. A Kevin Durant team should not be 500.
They're bored. Yeah, they're bored and tired of. They knew it was coming down to this, especially once it looked like Houston was gonna capture that top seed, and then Curry going down. We'll see. Just last year you've already referenced this a little bit, Tom, in that Cleveland was such a bad defensive team last year and was so good in the postseason, in the East anyway. Obviously, Golden State is not the same team as last year. They're missing guys. Their bench is different, of course, than what they've had in the past to some degree. But they're going to play much better defense. They're going to play much better overall. I still wouldn't favor them to win the West. But I think this is one of the two most interesting coaching matchups, along with what Spoelstra is going to do in Miami. Pop is going to cook something up. He so rarely has this position where there's just nothing to lose, no expectations. Mm-hmm. We saw what happened last year until Kawhi went down, that one little blip where they were just cooking the Warriors. And in my opinion, could have won the series. I thought they could have won the series before game 1. I certainly thought so at halftime of game 1. I don't think they would have necessarily, but I thought they could have until Kawhi went down. I think Pop is going to do something funky. He's done some funky things before in the postseason, as you know, as a Miami guy, Tom, during that Ray Allen championship series. It's going to be.
SDI was going to be the MVP for a while. Yeah. Yeah,
and they just didn't guard anybody, and it really got into LeBron's head and Miami's head. They'll do something funky, but I think we'll see Golden State play like they did in the postseason last year, which is good enough to beat up the Spurs.
And it would be a different thing, too, if the Spurs had just a little more dynamism offensively or even a little more spacing. I think they're able to make chicken salad, so to speak, out of, LaMarcus Aldridge's post-ups just because
Did you just call LaMarcus Aldridge post-ups chicken shit? Is that what you just did?
More the spacing is the chicken shit. I think the post-ups are the chicken salad. But, if you just were to freeze frame a LaMarcus Aldridge post-up and where all the other Spurs are on the floor and how much their defenders are or are not guarding them, you would be amazed at some of the results of those plays. And especially, LaMarcus is such a low turnover player, which is part of why he's been, pretty efficient in the post this season, relatively speaking. But it's just not enough. When you're talking about a Kevin Durant team, a team that can defend like the Warriors can when they want to, which, as we've mentioned in the regular season, has not been all that much. But all this, circling back to the Steph stuff, though, I think he deserves a place in kind of the new parameters of the MVP conversation we've been talking about, because he is one of those guys who puts up the box score numbers, but just in terms of impact is just on another level. And I would have been very curious to see if he had played 75 games this year, 70 games this year, where he would have fallen into the voting, just because obviously Harden has been so unbelievable in terms of carrying the Rockets and what they do and so instrumental to them. But the on-off splits for guys like Steph, just the tangible feel of how different the Warriors play when he's on the court, what he opens up for their offense is so huge that I would have been shocked if he didn't have a pretty prominent place on that ballot too.
Guys, that wraps it up. I think I got Golden State in 6, Houston in 4, Portland in 7, Utah in 6, Cleveland in 7, Philly in 6, Boston in 7, Washington in 7. I'm going to be wrong on all of those. I just wanted it for the record. So it'll be really fun when the Raptors sweep the Wizards. It's going to be really fun. And you know what? That's what it's all about.
Which pick do you feel the worst about?
Which pick do I feel the worst about?
Which one do you think is the most dangerous for you to be so clearly wrong?
Obviously it's Washington in 7. But I also I feel like there's a lot of potential for OKC if they just flip that switch and they destroy the Utah Jazz like they did in the first few matchups this season. Could be ugly. I think I feel like Melo has another gear, but we've talked about it on this podcast, Coach. I just don't think the Thunder are that good. They're good on both ends of the floor. I don't think they're great, and I just think they got too many limitations when it comes to the team playing together. I like Utah on that one still. I'm just trying to convince myself Utah in 6. Coach, anything else you want to hit before we go?
I guess I would say that, first of all, it's always a pleasure with you, Tom, and bringing different people in every week is fun. The one thing I'd want to say to anyone listening is I think people get so caught up in the prediction part of it. And Tom, I can't speak for you, so I want you to address it. And Rob, you can address it if you get into this business too. Of the 100 things that people who do what we do for a living have to focus on, predicting is last. This is not what we get paid to do. This isn't, first of all, anyone in the prediction business knows it's folly anyway. One tweak of an ankle changes everything.
Yep.
And you can't predict those things necessarily, certainly not those of us that don't have any medical records at all to look at. The joy of the games to me is literally 100%. I don't care if I'm right or wrong because I don't spend any time worrying about being right or wrong. I'd rather be right on what I think actions are going to work or what lineups might be interesting to look at as I play around. I'm capturing video of these games and sending to the coaches that I help around the world, really. Look at this action. Look at this twist on horns and Spain action and what are teams doing versus Spain action, or how can we get tweaks up on Spain action? I'm looking at the drama of the players, the joy of their faces, the stress. Andrew Wiggins did not want to touch the ball last night. And I watched that yet. He made a huge assist to Jeff Teague for the floater.
Yep.
And he freaking nailed those free throws. I watched his form and told my son, I think he'll miss both. And he nailed 2 with perfect form.
See, that's why you should make predictions.
Exactly. I was just reading the tea leaves and I was wrong. What I thought was nerves was just focus. And I love that. And I learned something with Andrew for that. And so for those that are watching, if you want to you can criticize us all you want for predictions. I don't give a fuck. But you're ruining the opportunity to experience the greatest basketball in the world. And I watch a lot of basketball globally. This is the best league in the world by far for a reason. Look for all those things. Don't worry about what those of us who are guessing predicting any one thing. It's just too many variables for that. Enjoy the greatest basketball by the world's best players. That's my mission for the playoffs every year.
And enjoy it while wearing a tank top.
Oh yeah.
Yes. No choice in Florida.
It's a beautiful day here in Charlotte. I got to get outside for a little bit before I get back to work. Rob, thank you so much. Where can we find your work besides the Twitters?
Yeah, Sports Illustrated, si.com/NBA. You can also check out, I have a podcast called Breakaway. It's a narrative podcast about how the NBA works. So you can check that out as well. Our latest guest is Wayne Ellington, who, as we mentioned earlier, just broke the record last night for the most three-pointers made by a Heat player ever.
Yep.
Earlier this season, broke the record for the most three-pointers by a reserve ever. So hell of a year for Wayne.
Great story, too, by Wayne Ellington.
Yeah.
Great story about him.
Yeah, so our story with him is just, going through the life of a journeyman in the NBA and kind of what it takes to get that one break like he got with the Heat to really make everything work.
Awesome. Well, I got my break with the Heat, and I don't know what you call this career, but they've been very good to me. They've been very good to Wayne Ellington and another Deke, James Johnson, and certainly other people. But that story, Wayne Ellington, a Carolina guy himself, go listen to that podcast. Thank you, Rob, the coach at flowsports.com and at his Twitter, Coach Thorpe at Coach David. Is it Coach David Thorpe on the Instagrams?
Instagram's Coach David Thorpe. Twitter's Coach Thorpe. Yes. Thank you.
And also on Facebook for his great missives on there. So everybody, thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the basketball. And I could not agree more on Coach Thorpe's speech about why predictions are dumb, and they suck the joy out of watching the games. I haven't done this yet, but the NCAA tournament, I'm going to try not making a bracket next year and see how it changes.
I haven't made one in 16 years. You're exactly right, Tom. I root for whatever my son chooses, but I just try to enjoy the drama.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And Jade, thank you for hanging out and being such a big part of the conversation. We will talk this time next week. There he is. How you doing, Jade?
Good.
How are the kids?
We're chilling. They're good. Everyone's tame right now. So.
Good. All right. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the basketball. We'll talk later.